have to wait until the real happen. Should the United States today, in 2021, allow inhuman treatments of Haitians and say that they are friends of Haiti? And go to Haiti and say we will provide support? How dare they? How dare they stand up and say do not come, when the only reason they come is because they have been there? How dare the United States and Mexico deport little black girls and little black boys unwanted in their territories, yet say they are friends of Haiti? 200 plus years of discrimination, 200 plus years of the very idea of Haiti is unacceptable to the United States and the West. 200 plus years. 200 plus years of people ending up under the bridge. 7,000 people have been deported as of today. And we hear, where are the people who are under the bridge? And the government said, we have decompressed. We have had an amazing humanitarian success where the people are no longer there. Well, I witnessed, I saw, I smelled, and I saw myself in those people. It wasn't just them there, it was me there. It was me looking at myself. The only reason I'm here, not there, just the grace of God. So when we talk about how the United States is leading the war against black bodies, against Haitian migrants, now allowing Mexico, Panama, Peru, Colombia to follow suit as one of the greatest countries in the world, using Title 42 as a ruse to destroy the lives of the same people that they have been destroying back home, it is unacceptable. So, this is where we are. 11 borders, many countries, each and every one have been given carte blanche and the green light by the United States to continue to mistreat Haitian bodies.
And funding. Let's also say that we are leveraging the United States economic might to incentivize other countries to deport Haitians across the entire Western Hemisphere. And this weekend alone, there were over 1,000 Haitian refugees who were attempting to make it to South Florida by sea, because this is not just, again, this is not just a border issue. There is a humanitarian crisis, there is a complete collapse of the state. What state? There is environmental crisis, and there is no sufficient government response by transitional government in Haiti. So what are you expelling or deporting people to? It's not just about the inhumane treatment of folks once they get here, but the entire system is guilty. And so when we look at Title 42, can we take a step back for folks that may not be familiar with it? I'm going to look to you, Vanessa, our resident attorney, to break it down for folks and explain why the lucky few who have survived the treacherous journey to make it to the US border for refuge, whether it's by land or sea, are not even being given a credible fear interview.
Right, so I want to remind folks that Title 42 has been in existence for decades, right? And last administration, Stephen Miller decided he was going to bring that back up, and really as a way to close the opportunity to immigrate to folks coming through the border specifically, right? And not only the southern border at Mexico, but also to the north in Canada, right? And so that was the idea behind it. But who does it affect, right? it affects a certain type of people. And remember that this administration had already told us, right, to which group of people that their doors were open and to whom they were not. And so this was just a way for them to justify, especially in the context of this global pandemic that was affecting us all, right? Using all of that to then say, you are not welcome here. And what we thought was going to happen under a new administration was that that would be rescinded. And I think that many of us were, if not all of us, were calling on the administration to rescind that. And what they decided to do is continue the use of Title 42. Effectively still keeping the border closed. And we've heard this administration actually say, don't come here. And so when a video is played of the leader of the administration who told us not to come here, it's hard for me to be excited about that. Hard for me to, really celebrate that. Because you just told my brothers, my sisters, my siblings, and my cousins not to come here. But remember as well, right, that they're not just coming through the border. As you just mentioned, Krystina, folks have been coming in, our siblings and our cousins have been coming in through the sea as well and hitting South Florida, where I'm from. And there seems to be something about seeing nearly 18,000 people arriving at the border, amassing at the border, that really pulls on our heartstrings and tells people, you know what, we need to rush and we need to go do something, right? But there's also something about those 18,000 people coming here and the majority of them being Black refugees that's threatening. It's scary, right? That all of a sudden we need to do something, we need to, get something done, but we know that that's not being done across the board. And it shouldn't be done. But I also want to remind people that for the past few years, for as long as Haitians have been coming here, right, we get interdicted at sea and sent back, or we're put into detention, placed in expedited removal, and rushed out of the country, forcibly returned to the country that you jacked up, for lack of a better term, for us and forced us to come here. Nobody wants to leave home. Everybody wants to stay home. Okay. Beautiful sandy beaches, but guess what? Those beautiful sandy beaches are not for all of us. And so we don't want to have to come, but you who have come into our countries and told us that you're the big brother, then we come to you to seek the refuge and this promise that you told us was real when you came to our countries.
And Title 42 is just the most recent manifestation of our anti-Black immigration policy that has weaponized public health against Black bodies. Let's be very, very clear about that. We have perfected detention and expulsion and parole, all of which born out of Haitian refugee crisis of the 80s and 90s. Before the 80s and 90s, there was no detention. There was no parole. That was in response to the Haitian refugee crisis. With that, we have so much to hit, so I'm trying to move forward. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Ronald. So can you share about what Baji is working on and as it relates to advocacy and what exactly we're calling on Congress and the administration to do?
For sure. So first, I also wanted to add a quick point in the sense that I think Guerline raised as well. When they say that there's news now that they voluntarily deported themselves to Mexico, no one voluntarily deports themselves. So let's just say that. And then on top of that, now they're deporting, Mexico is deporting Haitians and Black migrants. So there's 70 that I think were deported in the last week and more flights to come. So we just have to understand that it's like, whether it is, when we say no, we're giving permission to these other countries to do the same, and they are doing the same. But on top of that, in terms of the advocacy work and what Baji is doing, I recommend everyone, if you have not already, to visit our website, baji.org. You'll see resources and information of the work that we have been doing for Black migrants. But then you'll also see some of the most recent work. So in partnership with Haitian Bridge Alliance, Undocu Black, African Communities Together, we recently filed a complaint to DHS in the Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, because the idea is that, you know, right now everyone's asking for investigations into what has happened. We need to hold folks accountable, but the witnesses and the victims have been deported. How are you going to hold an investigation, find out what happened when the people most impacted aren't there? So, you know, this complaint gets at that and makes sure that, one, we offer a pathway to return for those that have been unjustly deported. Then on top of that, making sure that, you know, if they are here or if they are trying to seek asylum, they have access to counsel, they have the language services that they need. And so all in all, just protections against deportation. So that's some of the work that we're doing right now. And then I know your question reached out on what the administration can do and what Congress can do. I'll say first off and most simply, they can stop deporting Black migrants in the Haitian asylum seeking. That's first and foremost. Then after that, you know, we can look at TPS. You know, the continuous presence date right now, I believe, is July 29th. So folks that have been continuously present in the U.S. from July 29th are eligible for TPS. But as we said, the earthquake happened on August 14th. So we need to update that date to at least August 14th or further. And then also offer DED protections, just anything to give them an opportunity to apply for asylum. And this goes for, you know, not only Haiti, I know that's why we're here for, but I have to mention Ethiopia and all the Cameroon, these folks that are also being at the border, that are being deported. So we have to also make sure we uplift those folks. And then after that, you know, we have to look at reinstating the Haitian Family Reunification Program, and then also, you know, humanitarian parole. They have to be given a chance and an opportunity, a deserved opportunity to apply for asylum. So that's what the administration can do.
Thank you so much. There are many calls to actions. I know that you all have a sign-on letter and a petition. Highly encourage you all to please go to Baju's website and sign on. We need to apply pressure. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to Jean Homer. So as Unite Here Local 100 is home to a very large Haitian diaspora in terms of their membership. Can you share a little bit more about how these essential workers, how these folks that are crucial to our communities are being affected by the policies impacting our Haitian community?
Absolutely. But first, I'd like to refer back to some of the comments made by my fellow panelists here. The relationship between Haiti and the United States is not new. I want to remind us that we have a couple centuries of history. Haitians fought alongside troops here during the Revolutionary War and during the Civil War. We have a long relationship. We just find that our friends are not treating us very well. Having said that, hundreds of thousands of our members are Haitian immigrants, got workers here. They have come here to find refuge, as you would say, sister, look into our brother, say, hey, older brother, we need some help. Haitian immigrants and refugees come here, and I love my country, it's beautiful, some of the most beautiful beaches.
In the South, in particular.
Let me tell you, the food is to die for. If you've never had Rio, try it. But let me tell you, Haitian migrants have come here, they've worked here, and many of them came here to flee what is almost certain death in our country. I'm sure we all remember the 7.0 earthquake over a decade ago. Many of those Haitians that crossed the border, as my sister referred to, they were in other countries, they fled in South America, they were welcomed. Recently, they found their way up to Mexico and crossed the border. Now, mind you, the backdrop of recent events. Another earthquake. Never thought I'd see one, let alone two. And then, soon after that, the second earthquake, there was a hurricane. Ida came through where I live in New Jersey. It was devastating. But we have great infrastructure, a lot of support, which we don't have in Haiti. And then, of course, the assassination of our president. Let's add crisis upon crisis. So Haitian immigrants not only are here, but I'll give you an example of a TPS recipient, whom, by the way, live under the threat. Imagine what that would be like to live not only year after year, because when the date comes, you start worrying months before. But then there may be no more TPS, and you may be deported and separated from families. I have an example of Wilma Destin. She's a housekeeper in Florida, works in Disney. She's worked there 20 years, owns a home, has children here. Her husband also is a TPS recipient. And they constantly, in spite of being stable, contributing to our society, let me tell you, contributing to our society economically, and yet, year after year, fear that they may be taken away from their home that they've built here. And by the way, we have a saying, ici, c'est la caille. And what that means in English is, here, this is our home. When we come here, thank you, sisters, we can clap. Ici, c'est la caille. Repeat after me. Ici, c'est la caille. Okay? We've made our homes here, and Wilma and her family live under the constant threat of being deported. How do Haitians respond? How do Haitian voters, by the way, immigrants generally, we come here, we want to participate in the political process, because many of us didn't have that opportunity back home. When we come here with hope, and we say we want to be part of it. We want to be documented. We want a path to citizenship so we can participate in the process and influence policies. We want to do that. And so I'm from New York. I'm from one of the locals of our union, Local 100 in New York and New Jersey. And in 2020, many of my colleagues and many of our members left our homes to go to Florida, Nevada. We had hundreds of thousands of our members sacrificing their own homes in the middle of a pandemic. In the middle of a pandemic, you guys remember that, 2020? What it felt like? And in Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, and in Florida. I'm one of the persons, one of the Haitians that believe that my life and the life of my friends, family, and other Haitians that I knew, and other immigrants, and our lives depended on what we do in 2020. And we decided we will leave everything behind, and then we will knock on as many doors as we needed, talk to as many voters as possible to make sure that we change what the White House looked like. And we did it. We took back 2020. And I left my home. I was between Florida and Georgia. I was away from my home for 5 months. And many of our members did the same. And many of them were Haitian. And I led a team of Haitian women, powerful leaders in their own rights where they work. They were all laid off, and they said, you know what? We're not just gonna sit. We're not gonna just sit back and wonder what's gonna happen. What's our fate? They said, we are gonna be in control of what our fate is gonna be. So what they did was they left their own homes. These are mothers and these are wives. They had children and husbands and families at home. And I led 8 of those Haitian women, 6 days a week, and knocked on doors. Each of them about 15,000 voters that they each spoke to. Okay? And we secured the White House. And every single one of these
So I
women.
think this is actually a great segue into these campaign promises that were made.
Yes.
You may have heard some of them. So like GPS, which we got 8 months into, or about 7 months into the administration.
Took too long.
We didn't get, we applied pressure.
We fought, right? We fought hard and won.
The moratorium on deportations, which apparently didn't apply to Black immigrants. And we don't have time to talk about foreign policy. So with that, I'm going to pass to Guerline to talk about these broken promises.
Are you sure you want me to talk?
I made a face just for you.
Let's talk about Build Back Better. You know, I was telling somebody the other day I didn't have high blood pressure until the night of these elections. And we had the hope of the promises that were made to us. And Vanessa will tell us how the president came to our community, bended knees.
In the
I also want to acknowledge the Haitian American elected officials who are here today, Mr. Alex Desume and Councilman Alex Desume, Councilwoman Mercedes, right? And our dear
Madam Clerk.
Madam Clerk, Vanessa Jozef. So, and also Representative Dottie Jozef. And I am saying that because we have over 120 plus elected officials, Haitian American elected officials, across the country, from Florida to Arizona, to Chandler, Arizona, y'all. So when the elections were in jeopardy, when they were getting very close to losing, at the very last minute, they came on bended knees to the Haitian community. We delivered. So our thing right now, build back better. We don't have a space to build back from. We have to build from where we are. So build back better requires that protection is provided for Black bodies at the US-Mexico border. Build back better requires that we should not have to fight so hard to get CPS designation for Haiti while it was handed to other people. And saving the soul of America, that President Biden, President Harris, the first Black vice president, ran on saving the soul of America from the prior administration, is what we are seeing right now. Saving the soul of America requires, no, demands that protection is provided for Haitian migrants who have been forced due to internal violence, i.e. assassination of president, continued gang violence and all of that, and external violence from the United States, from Canada, from our colleagues that continues to make sure that our very existence is unacceptable. So when we talk about broken promises, when we talk about I come to you and kneel and beg you and ask you and I will give back to you, and then you spit in our faces, well, the elected officials are here, elections are coming up, promises will be made again. This time, we will not buy it.
You can know what that's it. And so we do have some local elected officials in the room, and I know, as a person who leads the Office of New Americans in Miami-Dade County, we immediately, we've been in crisis mode since, forever, but trying to figure out how do we respond to the needs that are being ignored by the federal government as local governments. And so I'm gonna pass it to Vanessa again, because I know we have these conversations. What is the role of local government in this moment to welcome Haitian refugees?
Absolutely. And I think that one of the most important things to highlight is that every county should have an Office of New Americans. Every county should have a Krystina Francois, to be specific. And the reason is because, Krystina and I always joke around about this, but that's my coworker. She's my actual colleague. I mean, I work at Catholic Legal Services. That's my day job. But Krystina, Francois, and I speak every single day. And every single day we're trying to figure out, how do we build and continue these collaboratives that are doing TPS, not only for Haitians, but for Venezuelans as well. We were doing collaborations to make sure that naturalization was accessible to everyone in the middle of a panini, okay? A whole panorama is going on, and we're like, well, we're just gonna have to get on the computer and empower our folks to use the technology to be able to become naturalized citizens. And so we've been doing a lot of this work, but we can only do so much, right? So every county has to put in that work to develop an Office of New Americans, and damn it, the states need to have an office dedicated to refugee integration, to immigrant integration, refugee resettlement. I mean, it's an absolute demand that we must all have on our policy agendas. And so one of the things that we're working on, at least for the city of North Miami, and shout outs to the National Haitian American Elected Officials Network, right, who is replicating some of this around the country with the different elected officials that we have. We're trying to open these welcome centers that have been open for other folks, and making sure that those resources that our siblings and cousins really need are going to be accessible to them wherever they may land. And we know that the need is especially great in South Florida. And so Krystina and I mean, it's been weeks. I remember I said, Krystina, we need to come up with something. All I said was we need a space where we can put all the resources and all the service providers so that we can make sure when our siblings and our cousins come to us, right, there's a one-stop shop. Because there is nothing more demoralizing than getting somewhere and being given a piece of paper and told to go to the next place for what you need. Being run around here and there and everywhere just to get a simple service or to get access to a basic need. And so one of the things that local governments can do is work with your CBOs, your nonprofits that are in your community, and work on developing centers that can house all of the resources and all of the service providers that a new arrival may need. Whether it is shelter, which is one of the most important needs, whether it is, clothing that folks may need, food, then of course you have your legal and your medical services. Another thing that I really want to encourage people to think about is joining the Vera Safe Cities initiative. Talk to your local governments about joining Vera Safe Cities, which provides a mechanism for universal representation, and especially for those folks who are in immigrant detention. We need to be serious about forcing people to do their work, their job. And that is part of the work. Just because someone is locked behind bars for a civil violation.
Correct.
Does not mean that they deserve to be caged up and completely forgotten about. And so we need to put some pressure for there to be funding allocated to that group of people who is constantly always forgotten. We're right now, because we saw it on the news, right? A crowd of almost 18,000 people under the border, but we never think about the people who are in detention. We never think about the fact that they have $25,000 bonds. Parents.
And that's also where half of the people who are under the bridge are currently. Let's not forget.
And then they don't want to tell you where they are, and that's a huge problem. And then on top of the fact, these are mothers, fathers, okay? These are the people putting bread in the household, putting food on the table, all right? And so we have to be real careful about prioritizing one group over another. All immigrants matter. And reducing them to just their economic value is even more problematic.
Preach, girl, preach.
Because that demonstrates that we cannot even acknowledge their simple humanity by virtue of them being human.
Amen. And what I wanted to add is I want to acknowledge Sadie. Sadie, can you get up, please?
Sadie,
And I am asking her to get up for 1 minute and acknowledge her. Last year, June 15th, received a call from a gentleman from Cameroon. It's 12 midnight. Sister, they got me. Because we couldn't pay a $30,000 bail for him. 5 minutes later, another one called. Sister, they got me. They all call me sister, godmother, whatever. And then I hung up the phone. I said, enough is enough. I called Sadie at 2 a.m. in the morning, in tears, and said, girlfriend, I'm tired. We've had this conversation for the past 5 years. Today, $60,000 were unable to be paid for a brother from Cameroon and a brother from Haiti, while I have 25 other requests. And a woman who has a breast tumor with a $30,000 bail, unable to pay. We spent 6 hours on the phone. At 7 a.m., she said, here are the information. You get to the bank, you open an account. I said, God, I only have $250. She said, well, that's what you're going to do. I went to the bank, opened an account, and we launched the first Black Immigrant Bail Fund. As we are part of the system and we're trying to dismantle it, as you mentioned, we have to save lives. I was tired of losing lives, and that day we said no more. When other bail funds had a cap of $10,000 and our people have a $70,000 bond. I am so proud, sister, to say to date, as we celebrated the first year anniversary of the bail fund, we have paid over $1.2 million to save the lives of the people you just mentioned, forgotten, where others are afraid to touch their cases because I don't know their cultural background. I don't speak their languages. We have country condition experts. We have interpretation. We have translation. Don't be afraid to take a Haitian case, a Senegalese case, a Cameroonian case. We do matter too. So as we continue to function and operate in the system, in the cruel system, we must come together and create the Black Immigrants Bail Fund, to create the end of detention, to fight for X, Y, and Z, because if we don't do it, who will? And if not us, then who?
And don't leave it to Black people to be the only ones doing this work.
So that's a great segue to our final question. this conference in front of you. No, this was very good. So we're going to hear a lot about solidarity. We've already heard a lot about solidarity this morning. So what does it actually mean? So everybody will answer this question. What does it actually mean to stand in solidarity with Haitians and Black immigrants in this moment?
I'd like to start on the policy side. First of all, what it means is looking at something like the executive order that Governor DeSantis published and not see it, not look at it vaguely, but really take a look at it and realize that it is an attack to Haitian immigrants. It is an attack to Black immigrants. It is a reminder of the 1980s and a reminder of the 1990s. And what it means to stand in solidarity is when we come together and we decide that we're going to fight this as a discriminatory act, then we need to all, not just Black immigrants, we need to all organizations that are also work mainly with Latino immigrants to all come up and stand up. When they attack one of us, they attack all of us. When they talk about immigrants, they're not only talking about Latinos, they're talking about Black immigrants as well. And when we, as Black immigrants, we stand up with Latino immigrants, it is time for Latino immigrants to also stand up with us as Black immigrants when we're being singled out and attacked in various policies. If the eyesore that happened 2 weeks ago were Latino immigrants, it wouldn't have happened like this. When I got to Del Rio and I realized how they erased us overnight and we never existed under that bridge, it wouldn't have happened that way. So solidarity means support us when we go into a fight, when we know that we are being attacked and singled out. Support means, and solidarity means, help us and speak up with us when we are speaking up about international policies, when we are being attacked, because your countries too are being attacked. Because the root causes of migrations of the folks from your countries are also due to US